It's really important for us to pair those anecdotes and those testimonials with hard data that reporters and other stakeholders can consume and that will resonate with them, not only from ezCater's perspective, but from the industry as a whole.
Welcome to an episode of Signal in the Noise. I'm your host, Dan Gaynor. Thrilled to welcome Jennie Hardin, VP of Communications at EasyCater, today on the episode. She shares her career journey, emphasizing her passion for PR and intellectual agility. Jennie also discusses how EasyCater evolved from originally just aiding sales reps with meals to help them close deals to becoming the leading food tech platform for workplaces on its way to an IPO. Jennie highlights the disciplined and consistent messaging at EasyCater, something called food for work, blending human-driven hypotheses with data-driven insights. She talks about building trust in the business through genuine care and empathy and the importance of wanting people and customers to succeed. And through it all, Jennie focuses on enabling the communications function to drive the company's business strategy, one that pushes the growth of the company and leverages employees as ambassadors so that everyone feels connected to the day-to-day of the business. The communications team, in other words, becomes the central artery of everything that the company is doing to drive growth. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Signal in the Noise. I'm your host, Dan Gaynor, and I'm thrilled to be welcoming a fellow Boston local, the Vice President of Communications for EasyCater. Welcome, Jennie Hardin.
Oh, thanks, Danny. Happy to be here. Longtime listener, first-time guest. So thanks for inviting me.
So happy to have you here. EasyCater is a fascinating company, and we're going to get into all about the transformation that's going on your day-to-day life. But would love to start with a little bit about your current job today. Tell us what you do. And then from there, I want to know a little bit about your career arc. But just describe, what does it mean to be Vice President of Communications for EasyCater, which I should mention is a leading food for work technology company?
Yeah, well, you did the first job for me. So I was going to tell you about what EasyCater is. You're right. We are the leading food for work technology company. And what that means is we make it easy for organizations to manage all of their food needs and orders from all of their favorite restaurants in one single platform. So if you think about the fact that workplaces have changed a lot over the last 5, 10, 15 years, fluctuating headcounts are an issue for organizations and for workplace leaders. We're really coming in and providing flexible and scalable solutions for them to manage everything from recurring employee meals to one-off meetings. And we're backing that with our beyond helpful customer service, our business grade reliability. So we're doing some really exciting stuff at EasyCater. But in terms of what my role is specifically at our organization, like you mentioned, I'm VP of Communications. And what that means is that I oversee all of our brand touch points. So not only is it your traditional communications functions of PR and internal communications, but also creative, content marketing, social media, and sustainability. So I've got a broad scope and it's really exciting.
There's nothing you don't cover. And I would be interested in learning a little bit about your career path and how we got there. You've obviously had a very varied career path. I don't want to, like spoiling what EasyCater is, bury the lead here, but basically you've worked for some really big, sophisticated organizations. You worked in very entrepreneurial roles. Walk us through the story here. Was this all part of a master plan? If not, what were the forks in the road?
You know, it's funny, when I hear the term master plan, I think of Taylor Swift because she's the only one that comes to mind that I think could confidently say she had a master plan for her career. So that's one way of saying that, no, my career arc was definitely not part of a master plan.
That's why you and I aren't self-made billionaires like Taylor Swift,
right,
but we probably should have had one at 17 or whatever.
Yeah, maybe someday we'll put our heads together after the podcast and figure out how we get there. But for me, my career wasn't part of a master plan. It wasn't particularly linear. When I reflect back on my career so far, there's really three things that I think have either subconsciously or consciously motivated me to seek out particular opportunities. And one is opportunities that allowed me to connect with people and have an impact on their daily lives. The second is opportunities that allowed me to be really, really curious and learn a lot about different parts of an organization and how they all knit together to tell one story and to progress the company forward. And the last is the opportunity to be creative. I'm not artistic in the traditional sense, but roles that allowed me to really stretch beyond my bread and butter, think creatively about how to solve problems, tackle particularly difficult crises, for instance, or chart the path of transformation for these companies. And so that's what I think are kind of like the through lines. My heart is in PR. That's where I started my career. But when I think of how communications has evolved and how my career has evolved, it's so multifaceted. And so what I loved about working for a big Fortune 250 big box retailer is that we had an opportunity to talk to all kinds of different consumers. I had a seat at the table where I was able to partner with our executive team to knit together that story of how we were transforming our company and how we were solidifying ourselves as an essential retailer in families' lives. And then I take that to ezCater and I think about how we're transforming food for work. And I think about how at the core, everyone's got to eat. We're filming after lunch. I hope you've had a chance to eat lunch today, Danny. I'm going to assume you have.
And I had takeout, actually. So
okay, there you go. Perfect. I had a sad sandwich, which is no knock on my husband who made it for me. But tomorrow I'm looking forward to going into the office and having el barrio, a taco salad from el barrio. But all that to say is food impacts all of us. And so when I think of the companies I've worked for and the roles that I've had, that ability to impact folks' daily lives is something that's been really important in continuing to grow and be curious and be creative.
In other words, the actual mission of the company has to be somehow tangibly related to intersecting with people's day-to-day lives and making it better, right?
Right.
And in addition, what I'm taking away from what you're saying is the importance of agility. I mean, you worked at BJ's Wholesale, right? Massive Fortune 250 retailer, big box. You went to Rue Gilt Group, right? The world of fashion and shopping and e-commerce. And now here at ezCater, what's fascinating to me is there's like a B2B side. There's also a B2C side. There's big companies you work with. There's small organizations. There's a technology story. You have to be a really agile intellect to navigate that particular path.
Yeah, I think so. And that's really what's kept me engaged and kept me on this path of communications and why I have no plans to leave.
Fabulous. Well, let's talk about ezCater. And I'm a little biased, but in the very vaunted Boston tech scene, we're known as the hub of biotech. We're known as like this super innovator and consistent winner in sports. And out pops a few years ago, this company that's founded by a really interesting person. So I'd love you to tell me a little bit about your founding CEO, Stefania, because I think it's a very unique founder story. And very much taking the world of catering, which, mom and pops have done forever, going back to Babylon, and turning it into a super hot tech company that many have said is like the next great IPO in the food world. You don't have to get into that, but I would love to hear a little bit about like the journey of ezCater itself and then your journey at ezCater as part of that rocket ship.
Absolutely. So we were founded in 2007 by Stefania Millette and Briscoe Rogers. Stefania served as our CEO up until last summer. And Briscoe is still our chief strategy officer, so still very much involved with the company. But ezCater was originally founded to enable sales reps to bring food to meetings and effectively close the deal, right? So food gets you in the door. Everyone wants to eat, like I said. And so that was their business tool to get more meetings and close the deals that they were looking to close and meet their quotas. And so that evolved into our core product, which is a marketplace. So connecting restaurants with organizations that needed food. And we broadened beyond just that sales use case to cover, like I said, one-off meetings, team lunches, team happy hours, and kind of everything in between. And what was really fascinating is, as you can imagine, when the pandemic hit, our business dropped almost completely overnight. I think we lost about 83% of our GMV. And we looked around and we said, okay, and I say we, I wasn't there at the time, but the company looked around, our leaders looked around and they said, okay, well, where's this 17% of business that's still coming in? Where's that coming from? And so that was really an opportunity for the company to look beyond your traditional knowledge workplaces and sales opportunities and think to other industries that don't have the ability to work from home, whether that's retail, manufacturing, and warehouses. And so out of kind of this traditional business catering and the COVID pandemic and the evolution of hybrid work came food for work. So how can we meet employees' individual preferences, their dietary needs? How can we create a solution, which is now relished by ezCater, to bring recurring employee meals from restaurants into the workplace in a really flexible and scalable way? And what I appreciate about Stefania and Briscoe is that they were really dedicated and passionate about creating a workplace with a culture that focused on autonomy and respect for employees. And so I won't rattle on all of the great workplace awards that we have, but we really are a great place to work. And we have this unique culture that's different than what I've experienced elsewhere. So that's a little bit about our history and story. And when we think about the opportunity ahead of us, there's incredible white space in food tech platforms and bringing this kind of solution to workplaces. The traditional corporate cafeteria doesn't really work for a lot of workplaces anymore. And so we're really looking to expand and gain our share of wallet by providing an even better tech forward solution.
It's such a diversified business, especially among what's technically a startup. I guess it's a scale up, or in any other definition, it's actually a very large company. You have the network enabling Joe's Sandwich Shop to send a bunch of footlong subs to somebody's birthday party. I literally, this is a plug, had my birthday party catered by EasyCater. We ordered Farm Grill, my favorite Greek place in Newton. So you can do that. There's the tech side of things where you can actually enable Joe's Sandwich Shop to understand their like suppliers and invoicing and finance and operations. That's really cool. And now you're thinking about the disruption of really the workplace itself. You mentioned Relish, the ability to create almost like a cafeteria on wheels, like a cadre of food carts that can go in at that more flexible cadence, like 3 days a week, instead of having your like Cisco college dormitory style cafeteria. Super different businesses. You're the head of communications. You do everything in the world of communications from internal to external. How do you tell a consistent narrative? What does your job consist of across such a diversified and dynamic business?
A lot of it comes down to discipline. So as you mentioned, we have a lot of different stakeholder audiences that we're targeting, and we want to make sure that our message resonates with each one of them. But at the end of the day, we also have to not lose sight of that North Star of what our core value prop is and our core messaging so that we're telling that consistent narrative. And that gets really difficult. When we're talking about the fact that we send this incremental business and these high value orders to our restaurant, we can be an engine to power the local economy. But then we're also talking about how we're modernizing the workplace. Like you said, it's easy to kind of teeter too far into one direction. And so it's really important to stay disciplined. I think the other aspect of this is we're a high growth tech company. So there's always some element of transformation that's happening when we're looking at ways to grow. And so how do we pull that consistent through thread of where we began, who we are now, and where we're headed so that that transformation is easily understood, not only by our external audiences, but our employees as well. You know, it's a really interesting balance to strike. It's definitely not easy, but that's where I think leaning on the data and the insights that we gain, not only from our platform, but from our partners like Signal AI is really important so that we're blending those human-driven hypotheses with the data-driven insights and coming up with a really informed narrative that we know is going to resonate and also advance our brand awareness.
Let's click deeper into that. It's a great through line to the next question I wanted to ask you. I think it starts with audiences, actually. I would love for you to break down the different audiences that are top priority, which is, as far as I understand, it could be like Wawa, where you want to go get a hoagie if you're in the Philly area, all the way to perhaps like delivery providers and tech, partners. Tell me a little bit about the variety of audiences you care about, by the way, including ezCater's own employees.
Right.
And then how you use data to knit together what you think would be a really smart message that resonates with audiences that don't always connect.
So I'll distill it into really kind of 4 key pillars. Restaurants, so that's our supply side. Customers, which could be everything from facilities managers, employee experience professionals, HR department, or your executive admins. Prospective and current employees, so that hits on workplace culture and the opportunities ahead in terms of our transformation and our growth plans. And then tech and business leaders. And so those are the 4 pillars we look at. I think what's been super helpful in how we've used data, and we definitely have your team to thank for this, Danny, is that we were able to partner with your team to really look at Signal AI's data and identify the areas in which we're doing really, really well in terms of our net sentiment score, where our storylines are resonating, and also where we're underpenetrated and we have opportunities to do more. So on the side of where we're being particularly successful is the restaurant side. So we've leaned a lot into our thought leadership there, into partnering with our restaurant partners to have them explain the value we provide them from that first party perspective, which is becoming even more important in the media, show, not tell. And we found that through your insight and analysis, we had a net sentiment score of 93% in that category. So we're like, great, that's working well. Let's keep doing more of it and maybe even apply more of that ethos on our customer side. Where we found we were underpenetrated is in that tech category, which may seem like an obvious opportunity. We're a tech company at our core. How could we be underpenetrated there? But the reality is that we were pulling the tech thread through a lot of our other messaging, but not necessarily putting it at the forefront. And so by looking at our competitors, by looking at the sentiment analysis that your team was able to provide to us, we saw a big opportunity to learn from our peers who are creating their own categories and charting their own paths, applying that for EasyCater. And so the ways in which we've operationalized that is we have invested more time and energy into standing up our CTO's executive thought leadership platform, not only in the media, but also on LinkedIn. And we've seen some great success so far. We've got some top tier coverage. Her LinkedIn platform just went live a little bit earlier this month, and we're excited to see some initial engagement. But that's another example of how we're using data and insights to think about our audiences and tell a story that resonates with them and tap into areas that are underpenetrated.
What is your CTO's name? We got to plug this in case people are listening.
Erin DeCesare, please go engage, like, share, subscribe, whatever you want to do on LinkedIn. We will appreciate any engagement and feedback that our listeners can provide us.
I think it's so interesting, though, that you said, okay, we want to look at areas of strength and opportunity. We understand when there's an area of strength, not that we're going to stop, but the machinery we have in place is working. There's definitive proof. We now see an area of opportunity on the tech side, which, by the way, if EasyCater were potentially to go public, that would be a very important area of the business to strengthen because we want to be perceived as a tech company, SaaS multiples, all those sorts of things. So there's a real financial dynamic there. And the fact that you've translated that so tangibly into, okay, and the best angle to tell that tech story is through executive thought leadership, I think is a really, thoughtful and frankly tangible way of how you've gone from insight to action, identifying an opportunity and going after it. I wanted to talk a little bit about the narrative you're pushing to the market because it is unique, right? We're not just this catering company. We're actually a tech network that enables the entire restaurant industry to reach mass scale. You've invented something called food for work. Now, tell me about the category creation story of food for work and how you're telling that story from a communication standpoint in an omnichannel landscape and across those four core stakeholder groups.
Yeah, so when we think about the category of food for work, it's really thinking about how workplace experience tech has evolved. So now workplaces have their own tech stack, whether it's Slack for communications, Google Workspace for document collaboration. If you're us, you have Robin to hotel your desks and sign in. And we want to be that food management tech platform that organizations integrate into their tech stack. And so that's something that's really important for us. When we think about telling that story across all different channels, again, we're using not only traditional media relations and PR, but we're also creating that surround sound effect in our social media, in our content marketing, and then also partnering with our go-to-market teams to think about how we get that in front of customers, whether that's through our growth marketing channels, email, SMS is another channel that's growing for us. And so it's really having that strong partnership with our corporate marketing and our brand marketing team to make sure that we are bringing the brand to life through all of our touch points in the most effective way. And one of the challenges is not only are we trying to drive awareness of who we are, but we're also trying to paint a picture of the problems that we're solving. Food for work is super complex and high stakes. Not a lot of people are paid to only think about food for work in their daily job. Maybe if you're a facilities manager, but it might be just another thing on your list. And so, not only do we have to drive awareness of who we are, but we have to drive awareness of the problem that we're solving for and the huge market opportunity that's out there for a solution like ours to really dominate.
Well, and think about the value prop that you are bringing to the table, right? It's the simplicity of not having to facilitate, 200 separate DoorDash orders. It's the attractiveness of the office, because as we well know, EasyCater put up this amazing study, basically that food in the office is the number one lever. And I think anybody who went to college and went to a house party where they're giving away free pizza knows this, but it's the number one way to get people back in the office. And in a way, I think your analogy about being that all-encompassing, trustworthy tech tool for a very important business function is such a brilliant analogy for positioning the business. I'd never thought of it that way. You have Slack for messaging, you have Workday for HR and finance, and for
Exactly.
food, we've got EasyCater. And seeing the business not as this like delivery app, but instead as quite literally a critical business function, I think is a brilliant and all-encompassing message that the small mom and pop restaurant wants to aspire to, that the office manager knows that they can lean on at an enterprise scale, and that the big corporation that very much wants to have people in the office 3 to 5 days a week knows that it can depend on and grow with. What a cool positioning. Clearly,
Yeah.
food for work is resonating. I get it. You have a new CEO. You've brought on some other executives. You're growing across those 4 audiences that you mentioned, and you're expanding into areas of opportunity, like really being perceived as a tech company. So much in your world is about this concept of reliability and
hmm
trustworthiness. It's got
hmm
to show up on time. The pickles have to be on the side. The dietary restrictions have to be respected. And you have to do this at a mass national scale. And particularly, you referenced the beginning of EasyCater, which started as like, hey, we need to close this deal in a sales meeting. If we don't have the food, the salads, it's just not going to be a good vibe. So really, it's a high stakes game if you think about it in terms of how personal food is. How are you building trust with the stakeholders that really depend on the platform?
It's a great segue, right? Reliability and then trust. Trust is core to what we do in communications. And if we don't have trust with our employees, our executive team, the media, our stakeholders, then we're just simply not going to be successful. You mentioned our new CEO and our new executive, our new chief revenue officer who just joined us, and building trust with them and the whole management team is so important. And I think whether it's executives or employees or the media, it comes down to really getting to know people on a human level and connecting with them on a human level. So that's where kind of that theme pulls in of what's inspired me throughout my career and kind of what's motivated me. At the end of the day, it's not just about pushing your own agenda or the story you want to tell or the headline you want to land. It's about understanding what motivates people, what's important to them, what their priorities are, and then simply listening and asking how you can support, right? I mean, that's the key to building trust, showing you genuinely care and you want them to succeed. And so that's the way that we think about building trust with our stakeholders. That's how I personally think about building trust with my peers. If we're going to be successful, it's really important not only that we're spinning a story. I think PR people get a bad rap for just spinning up a story without any kind of factual or foundational kind of information to ground it in, but it's about connecting with people, understanding what motivates them, and showing you genuinely care. And that's really the key to getting those shared outcomes.
But I love how you're saying that because it's just true internally on the interpersonal
Totally.
level. Okay, we've got a new
Totally.
CEO. Like, what are your objectives for transforming the company and how can we support? Start from their point of view. But equally true with the customers, right? I was watching one of EasyCater's videos on this company called Bakey, Bakey,
Yeah, we
which is
love
like an
baking.
incredible babka shop. And
Yeah.
it was interesting how exactly the food for work message resonated through their prism, which was Israeli immigrant who came and started a babka company, understanding that people might not even know what he was even selling, a babka or a bareka or anything like that. So he depended on EasyCater for clear branding and great imagery and putting him in a marketplace in the best possible way. But then also from the business side, understanding how to use analytics to drive growth, right? Understanding what kind of revenue he should expect, what his average order value should look like, and depending on EasyCater really as a business partner. And that video, I think, was really interesting because it was talking about what he needs to grow as an entrepreneur versus we have feature A, B, and C in the platform. And I think it's really cool to see that come to life in literally your own content.
Yeah, and it's that true partnership model, right? It's let us work together to create value that benefits both of us. So we're not coming in and saying, Bakey, you need to do XYZ, or I'm not coming in and saying, okay, employee or leader, you need to do XYZ. It's trusting that we will work together to drive that shared outcome and value that we're going to see on both sides. And that's really the key to sound simple intellectually. In practice, it's not always so simple, but
well, I don't think it's simple emotionally. That would be my line on it because it takes you understanding what you think anecdotally, I'm a comms pro, is going to work well, and really sidelining your ego and saying, no, I will
Totally.
always start with the learner's mindset. I don't know best. And that leads,
Exactly.
of course, to more authentic storytelling. Another side of the storytelling that I thought was great is your use of data. You talked about using data to inform, having insights that drive action. But what I also think is cool is that ezCater has leaned into like storytelling about data itself. So I'm
Hmm.
referencing the Food for Work report that you put out. You referenced the awards about being one of the best places to work. I think you're one of the best places to work in particular for parents, which is
Yes,
very cool. And now I have a greater appreciation for. I think we've got young kids about the
as
same
do I.
age.
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about that thought leadership with either awards or your own sourced data that is telling the food for work narrative, that category creation story in a more tangible way.
So we lean a lot on both our platform data and data we source from surveys. And so that's really how we strengthen our thought leadership across all of those pillars I mentioned, both in the restaurant trades, also among customers to show them how workplace food is evolving and how tech and ezCater is at the center of that. And then also data around how we are a great place to work and how we do support our employees. And so it goes back to that show, not tell mindset. So we can sit here all day long and talk about why food's important or the value that it drives from productivity and collaboration. But when we go out and survey the people who are actually ordering or the survey the people who are actually eating and hear from them directly, like you mentioned it a little bit earlier, that food is the number one perk for them. That's what's going to get employees excited and thinking about a new company. That's where they see value. Or for restaurants, that a large percentage of them are investing more in catering and business catering in particular because they see how that impacts their business and enables them to grow when other areas of the business are maybe not growing as quickly. And so it's really important for us to pair those anecdotes and those testimonials with hard data that reporters and other stakeholders can consume and that will resonate with them, not only from ezCater's perspective, but from the industry as a whole. And so that's where we think data is really powerful. And that's where we think we can flex our expertise and our position as the leader in this category to really show how big of an opportunity is for all stakeholders involved.
I think the thing that I love about ezCater is that it is truly a story where your growth means empowering more overlooked groups, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, it's folks like office managers who aren't always seen as strategic, but as you're mentioning, are literally holding the lever in terms of the most important perk. And especially when it comes to like having a hybrid work environment, it's essential. You're talking about people who can't afford to work from home, whether it's warehouses or manufacturing sites or hospitals and healthcare settings where the
Mm-hmm.
doctors have 20 minutes in between surgeries. And you're talking most importantly about small businesses, right? That this is not just about working with the biggest corporations, but really empowering the small local mom and pops to operate at a scale with a network that they would have otherwise been unable to build. How fun is it telling that underdog story and how ezCater is like the jet fuel for people who are sometimes overlooked?
Yeah, and I mean, that's kind of where it's really exciting for me that we can have this impact. When I talked about, the ability to connect with people and have an impact on their daily lives, like by no means am I doing brain surgery, right? Like we're talking about food in the workplace, but that's something that all of us can relate to. And when I think about making a workday a little bit better for somebody by bringing them one of their favorite meals from a local restaurant they love, or getting them a meal that maybe they wouldn't have had time to get otherwise. They're knitting together a couple granola bars and some coffee to make a meal. Like that's really exciting for me. We've all been there, right? And so I think that's what's really cool. And this idea that we can empower local restaurants and connect them to these high value customers so that they can have a growth driver for their business outside of kind of their normal on premise operations is something that's really exciting for me. And so that's where I think we can have an impact in a way that isn't your traditional kind of like nonprofit or public service sense, but still connect with people on the local level. I don't know that I answered your question, but
I think you totally did. And I think it's basically taking so many businesses and so many audiences into the 21st century and doing it with such a human lens in terms of leading with what's their perspective and how do I tell a story about our value prop, but then also our partnership together once they're on board. So I actually think not only
yeah.
did you answer my question, you took it to the next level. Speaking of taking it to the next level, you're still young, but you're at the point in the career where you can give some wisdom. And I wanted to ping you for some wisdom. And I would be interested whether it's reflecting on the crazy tenure you had at BJ's or Rue Gilt Group or this incredible growth trajectory like post-COVID where, oh my God, what is the food for work conversation even going to be when everybody's at home? I would just love to hear some either war stories / lessons learned that you might, if you had a time machine, tell to your younger self should, Jennie be starting out again today.
Oh man, young Jennie. What would I say to her?
Back at
Honestly,
BC, am I right?
yeah,
Go
back
Eagles.
at Boston
All
College.
right.
Go Eagles. Thank you for the shout out. I know BC alum can get a bad rap for sporting our alumni status so proudly. Yes, when I think back, what I would say, and honestly, what I still tell myself today is don't sell yourself short. I was super fortunate to have a lot of mentors and sponsors early in my career, particularly at BJ's Wholesale Club, that saw a lot of potential and possibility in me that I don't know that I fully saw within myself in that moment. So, I'm very lucky that I still consider them good friends and advisors today. I still talk with a lot of them on a regular basis. And so it's really don't sell yourself short. You're capable, believe in yourself and all that you can accomplish within this field. Because I had a few folks who tapped me on the shoulder and they said, hey, this would be a great opportunity for you. Or, hey, let's expand your scope because I think that you would really create an impact overseeing this area that maybe I didn't have as much experience in. And so that's true from my BJ's wholesale days. That's true the agency that I started with. I had a lot of great mentors and sponsors there, and I still consider myself really fortunate to have great colleagues. And so it sounds really cliche, but just, believe in yourself. Don't sell yourself short. Don't let that imposter syndrome get to you and just follow your gut.
I can totally relate. I got my first job in the private sector at Nike, and I had come from the world of politics. And I just assumed that a Fortune 100 company, everybody was just a genius. And I'll never forget being in the room, and I didn't understand what they were talking about with shoes or global marketing or
Right.
sourcing or anything. But I remember a distinct thought of thinking, no one's really smarter than me. And it wasn't like I'm so smart. It was like, oh, like I'm not that dumb. And I think for communications people, it's so essential to flex your business muscles just as much as your messaging muscles. And you, of all people, have really demonstrated that in your career, that you understand the companies you're working at the cellular level, and that up levels as a result, your work in comms.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, at the end of the day, we all have something to learn, right? We don't always have the answers. I think for communications in particular, it's so personal to people. And so I'm going to hear a message and it's going to resonate with me in a completely different way than you. And that's where I think inviting a lot of perspectives, checking your ego and having that growth mindset is so important, no matter what stage of your career you're in.
I know we're almost at time, but I had one question that just popped into mind, which is the operationalization, whatever you say. How do you operationalize that? Because one of the things that's interesting in your role is how closely you work with marketing, with technology, with the executive teams, with finance, to cascade a cohesive narrative, this food for work positioning across those priority stakeholder groups. If you had unlimited resources and a whole bunch of time to write your PhD thesis on the comms function of the future, what would it look like? What are the core tenets of that new structure?
The core tenets of that new structure, I think you first have to start with strategy, right? I mean, I think that's where the evolution of communications over the past few years has been really exciting for me because we now have a seat at the table in a way we didn't before. It's that business strategy lens, it's stakeholder management. And that I think in my mind casts a really broad definition, like we've talked about, from employees and media and investors to, depending if you're a highly regulated industry. I think it's bringing all those brand touch points together, that creativity and that storytelling. That's the third pillar. And then the fourth, I think it's employee engagement and really getting to know the employee perspective, because increasingly we see how important it is to engage employees and how the internal narrative often becomes the external narrative. And so I definitely think that there's an employee of people element there that is really, really essential. And then data kind of undercuts all of those things and brings them to life.
Well, thank you for just inventing, I don't know, like a whole new field of agencies. I'm sure there's a lot of people who are going to take this architecture and say, oh, this is our new structure. I would just double click on two in particular pieces of that tent, two tent poles, if you will, which were one, when you say strategy, you mean the business strategy.
Correct.
What is this company trying to do?
That's right.
What are the costs associated with it? What customers do we need to acquire? And how do we drive growth? And then on the back end, okay, how do we leverage our employees as ambassadors for that
100%.
strategy, but also rally around that strategy so everyone, whether you work in finance, HR, you're driving a truck, whatever it is, feels somehow connected to pushing that strategy forward. And what I think is super interesting is that you fashioned communications not as this function that talks about it, but actually as the central artery with a touch point to all four of those tent poles. So I think it's very cool to hear you articulate it. And maybe we'll steal some of that. So thank you. Well, Jennie, that is about all. I know we've kept you past time. I assume people can get in touch with you on LinkedIn.
Please.
Jennie Hardin, feel free to send her a follow. And thank you so much for sharing some wise words, some very good stories on this episode of Signal in the Noise.
Thank you, Danny, for having me, and look forward to listening to many episodes after mine.
Like and subscribe. And we might need to have you on as a co-host from here on out. Thank you, Jennie. That was fabulous.